Emerald, that was awesome.
That was like, it gives me chills how good that was. And I don't really want to be up here right now after that. So you guys can go home, grab some coffee. Hey, my name is Evan. I'm on the leadership team here at Eastown. I've been at Eastown actually since its beginning. It's been fun to kind of watch the journey through a lot of different things. And I also generally, if you've not seen me in here, I'm usually in there with the kindergarten through fifth grade. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, they're more my style, I'm not gonna lie. Adults make me a little bit more nervous, and I need to hang out with kids. It's my daily job, I do it here, So if I act a little nervous at the beginning, it's because I'm working towards pretending you're all a bunch of fourth graders, but we'll get there, okay? If you're at home, if you're watching us online, really hope to meet you soon. A couple of things before I get started. We've been going through this series about brighter days ahead and talking about hope. And I love that song. It is one of my favorite songs. And now I have a new favorite version of that song. And it's this ballad of hope, right? Of, hey, a change is going to come. This isn't the way that things ought to be. This isn't the way that things should be. And a change is on the horizon. And tomorrow is a big celebration that's come out more recently in history, and I think it's awesome. And it's Juneteenth, right? And it's this celebration of freedom, because here's the honest truth of it, is we celebrate freedom and independence, right, on the 4th a lot of times, but a good majority, specifically people of color in America, were not free on that first July 4th. And actually the real freedom and independence didn't come around until that June 19th, post the American Civil War. I love history, by the way. And so it's a good celebration to remind ourselves about a very hopeless situation that kind of turned, a change came about because of some people's efforts, of people pushing towards justice and equality. And we'll talk more about that when we talk about hope. Also, today is Father's Day. And as a father, I want to celebrate you guys, because being a dad is really hard. I told somebody the other day, I was like, man, it's like the best thing and the hardest thing I've ever done. So if you are a dad in this room, if you are a guy preparing to be a dad, if you're stepping into the role of dad for somebody who's not your son, we want to honor you today, and we celebrate you, because that's an incredible thing. And I know, like, my dad was killed when I was really young, and my mom remarried, and I had a dad that kind of stepped in. And I look back now and I think to myself, like, what a guy. Like, he really put up with somebody who was kind of a punk, I wasn't his kid, but he treated me like his own child. And so, Dad, I know you're not watching, but happy Father's Day, Dad. All right, so we are talking about hope in here, and our kind of theme is brighter days ahead with a focus on hope. And so I thought it would be good for us to kind of have a shared definition of hope. And I know that everybody kind of jumps to the dictionary to find out what hope is, right? But I'm going to do something different today in light of kind of the rise of technology. I asked AI, ChatGPT specifically this morning, what is hope? And here it is. Are you guys ready for this? ChatGPT. It's not plagiarism, or is it? Hope is a feeling of expectation and a desire for a certain thing to happen. It is an optimistic outlook on the future, even in the face of difficult circumstances. Hope can give people the strength and motivation to persevere through challenging situations and to strive towards positive outcomes. At its core, hope is a belief that things can get better, and it can play an important role in helping people cope with adversity and maintain a sense of resilience and optimism. I thought that was actually a pretty good definition, considering a computer in some room somewhere told me that. But I think that's a great thing. And here's the thing about hope, right? We all absolutely need it in our lives, right? Because if you look around, I was talking about this with the leadership team and the serving team this morning, about looking around, going on the news, and thinking about how tough it is, right? There is a lot of evil and injustice and difficulties going on in our world, that when you look at that, it can get pretty hopeless pretty quick. And I don't know, I go on the news and I see the violence, I see the tension, I see the division in our society. I think about kind of like I said, I love history, I've taught it for a lot of years. and I look at this kind of grand scope, sometimes we act like, oh, things are getting worse and worse and worse. But here's the thing, there has always been evil and always been injustice. You think about systemic racism, you think about wars at like a global level, and all of these things that when you focus on them, it's like, whoa, this is really depressing and really bleak and really hopeless. But I want to talk about today is a hope, because we're all these kind of like, we love hope. Hope is such a big thing in our lives. We pursue it. We get after it. We think about it like, okay, today's bad, but you know what? I think tomorrow is probably going to be better. We all do this in our lives where we're like, hey, things are going to change and things are going to get better. But I want to talk today about the things that we place our hope in. Kind of if you had a title for it, it'd be Chasing Hope. Because we all do this. I was on Google, because I love Google. Actually, if you looked at my Google search history, it'd be really embarrassing, because I Google like things I should probably just know, like what's 7 + 2, and like, you know, like even yesterday somebody was telling me about wombat poop, which apparently is in a square. So I was like Googling that, and I just Google weird things. But I was on Google and I was Googling about hope, and thousands upon thousands upon thousands of things came up. Different songs, different poems, different, you know, papers about hope, all kinds of things. So we're obsessed with this a little bit culturally because, you know, like I said, things are difficult. And I do this a lot in my own life, if I can be a little bit open and vulnerable with you. I think to myself, like, hey, I'm in a rough situation. I'm going through a difficult time, and I'm going to chase after something that I think will give me hope. And in my own life, it's like the next big thing is my thing. Like, what is the next adventure? What's the next thing that I've got planned in my life? And I put kind of all my eggs in that basket, if that makes sense. Like, I'm like, oh, I know I'm going through this really difficult time, but once I get this, I'll feel good. Like, everything will be okay. And so I do this a lot, like I said, with adventures. Like, I literally just got back on a family vacation to Europe with my wife and my kids and my family. And I'm like, this is wonderful. I should be so like satisfied. But now I'm kind of like, okay, what's next? What's coming up next? Like, that will kind of like help me kind of get through any difficulties that I'm going through. But then that thing happens, and I kind of focus on the next thing, right? We're designed to do this. We're designed to put our hope in something. And I think the big thing that I want to tell you today is that there is something, or more importantly, somebody that we can place our hope in that never changes, that is constant, that will stick with us through all those difficult times that we're going through, and that we don't have to chase after things that are fleeting, that disappear in a moment's notice, and that just don't last. And so let's talk about the things that we chase after, right? Because I think when we think about hope, we're thinking about going after peace and satisfaction and fulfillment and joy, right? And I'm not going to come at this with, hey, I've figured this out, but more of like, hey, I'm on this journey too, and so let's do this thing together. But I think too, one thing that we do is I talk about these things that we are chasing after and we're going after. A lot of them aren't necessarily bad things, but when we put all of our hope in them, when we put all of our eggs in that basket, if that makes sense, when they don't pan out or when they aren't as fulfilling as we thought they might be, there's just kind of fallout at the bottom because we put all those things, we didn't put a good foundation in those things. So let's jump into some verses in the Bible, and then I'll kind of go into some stuff. This verse is found in the second book of Corinthians in chapter 4. And it goes like this. If you only look at us, you might as well miss the brightness. We carry this precious message around in the unadorned clay pots of our ordinary life. That's to prevent anyone from confusing God's incomparable power with us. As it is, there's not much chance of that. You know for yourselves that we're not much to look at. We've been surrounded and battered by troubles, but we're not demoralized. We're not sure what to do, but we know that God knows what to do. We've been spiritually terrorized, but God hasn't left our side. We've been thrown down, but we haven't been broken. I know that, and Clint says this a lot, that you can't underestimate how much pain is in a room of people, right? I don't know everybody's story in this room, but my guess is there's quite a bit of difficulties going on in our lives. There's quite a bit of challenges going on in our lives, and we're maybe in a season of real difficulty, of real challenge. Maybe we're coming out of one, getting into one next. Maybe, we just came out of one and we're just waiting for the next difficult thing, because life is challenging. Life is really hard. And we rest a lot of times on that hope, right? Of like, hey, My hope is that things are going to get better. And I want to talk today about how important it is to put our hope in God, to put our hope in Jesus, who never changes, who's with us through it all, through those difficulties. And I'm not going to tell you that things are going to be like perfect in your life, that all of a sudden, because you trust in Jesus and because you put your hope in him, everything will be great and your bank account will grow. None of those, that might not necessarily happen. But what's important is that he will get you through those challenging times. But I want to talk about some things that we tend to chase after and put our hope in. The first one is success. And this might ring true for you. I don't know. It rings true for me a little bit. I want people to tell me that I'm doing a good job at something. I'm big words of affirmation type person. You can ask my wife. It actually annoys her. I'm like, will you tell me how good of a job I just did? She's like, you just like emptied the dishwasher. And I'm like, but who did it the best, right? Let's talk about that. And I want to be like really successful. And I want to be good at something and good at stuff. I kind of joked at myself a little bit and tried to pretend that this wasn't that big of a deal, to be like, no big deal. But it is a really big deal to me. I want to be successful. I'm a teacher, a high school teacher, in my day job. And I want to be known as like the most relational, like the best at teaching history, the teacher that every kid loves. Like I want to be really good at that. And a lot of times I put my hope in that thing. And maybe for you out there, it is your job. It is whatever God has you in right now where you're like, I just want to be really good at this. And you'll find is if you're putting your hope in that, a good test will be to find out what happens when that thing goes away. What happens to you internally? What happens to you in your life is like, oh man, maybe I had too much of myself, my dreams, my hopes, my aspirations in that. Like literally, like right before school ended, I was teaching and students were like, oh, we really love this teacher. Like she's awesome, she's so great. And I was like, I felt this little like twinge inside, like, oh, wait, better than me? You don't mean that, do you? I didn't say that, by the way, so don't judge me too harshly. But I found that, and I was like, oh, man, maybe I'm putting my hopes in being this kind of like big, dynamic, relational teacher way too much. Way too much, because as soon as that's taken away, I find myself being kind of like, ooh, unsettled, right? Kind of off my center. Another thing, too, that we might put our kind of hope in is our significance or our status, right? Maybe at work, might be in society, like, right, hey, I've got power, I'm in this place of prestige. And again, when those things are gone, do we have this kind of sense of hopelessness of like, oh, it's gone, I'm not gonna have it, I need to get that thing back, or else life is kind of like meaningless without it. Other thing too, that I'm not gonna lie to you, I'm guilty of this, is our relationships, right? Is do we put our hope in the relationships around us, right? Like my wife, a lot of times I'll put my hope in like how she responds to me about things or how she affirms me about things. And when it doesn't happen, I find myself kind of like unsettled and frustrated. And I'm like, what is that? What am I putting on her that doesn't need to be there? And that's when we put, I think, our hope in those relationships. A lot of times we do it with our kids too, where we say to ourselves, hey, you're gonna have to be this, and I'm gonna put you in this track of either sports or academics. And if you don't meet these expectations, oh man, everything is kind of off and I've gotta get you back on track. Because we're putting our hope in their outcome, in their successes, in those relationships in our lives to give us some kind of sense of fulfillment and satisfaction. And my encouragement to you is, again, to really evaluate in your life. I think one of the most important things you can do is self-evaluate, is be self-aware. And ask yourself is, what am I putting my hope in? Is it that success? Is it significance or status? Is it in these relationships? If those things were taken away, if they left, what would happen, right? And I think the fourth and final one I'm gonna talk about is a big one too, because money is kind of a big deal, right? Like everybody likes to have it. Whoever told you money can't buy happiness is only partially correct, right? Rich people seem like they're doing okay with their 2 yachts, right? Like, the love of money is a problem, I get that. But when we put our hope in money, it is such a fickle thing. It is up and down, right? It's one day the stock market has crashed and all your investments are gone and you're like, oh, well there goes everything that makes me feel safe, makes me feel confident, because we've put our hope in those things. And I think these are just 4 like examples of many things, I think, in our society, in our lives, that we just chase after. And we think that if we can just have more of it, or if we can just gain some kind of a stability in it, if we can just keep putting our hope in those things, we'll get that joy and peace and satisfaction and fulfillment that we've been looking for our whole lives. And I'm going to tell you something. You can talk to a ton of people who have a lot of money. Generally, what they want is just a little bit more of that money, or a little bit more of that success, or a little bit more of that significance. Right? There are people throughout history, like multi-billionaires, who are like, "Hey, what are you working for?" And they're like, "The next dollar," right? It's all about just getting more and more and more. We put our hope in those things. That makes sense, right? Like that does seem like that would be the chase. But I want to encourage you to something, right? They are traps through and through. They do not give you what they promise. They promise big and they underdeliver every single time. You will feel anxious and unsettled and just out of center when you put your hope in those things. I'm going to read a quote from one of my favorite musical artists. He is a rapper, but I'm going to do you a service and I'm not going to rap it. I'm just going to read it, okay? Yeah, that would be embarrassing. If you ever heard of the rapper NF, he is, in my mind, a lyrical genius. But listen to this quote about what he talks about putting his hope in. It's a little bit long, so stick with me. I'm not going to wrap it, I promise. What a little bit of faith can do if you don't believe in you. Why would you think or expect anybody else that's around you to? I done did things that I regret. I done said things I can't take back. Was a lost soul at a crossroad who had no hope, but I changed that. I spent years of my life holding on to things I never should have kept, full of hatred. Listen to this part. Years of my life carrying a lot of baggage that I should have run away from. Years of my life wishing I was someone different, looking for validation. Years of my life trying to fill the void, pretending I was in. I think there's so much power in what we do and what we chase after and what we put our hope in that's unfulfilling. And the song goes on to talk about how 30 years, kind of repeats this, 30 years I've wasted my life, 30 years I've been chasing after the wrong thing, putting my hope in success, in other people's validation, in people's love for me, whether they like me, all of these kind of crazy things that we put our hope in. And I want to encourage you to this. What we focus on matters. What we focus on matters through and through. We did a kids series a few months back, and the kind of the theme was focus, right? And it was encouraging the kids to keep their focus on something. And my encouragement to you is this, is to put your hope in Jesus. Keep your eyes on Jesus. Focus on Jesus. Life does get hopeless. I see that. Like, I don't know, again, what all of you are walking through in this room, but my guess is all of you have pain. All of you are going through some pretty challenging and difficult times in different ways and at different levels, right? But look to Jesus. There's a great verse that talks about him being the author and finisher of our faith, and I really love that. He's written our story. He's written our story already, and he knows where we can find satisfaction and fulfillment. I have chased in my life. I am 37. If you can tell me later on that, oh, you look like you're 22, that'd be awesome. I have chased so much of my life after things that I thought would bring me peace or satisfaction or fulfillment, whether it was parties and girls in college, to, success or significance in my job, to, I'm going to be the best dad out there, and I fail at that pretty regularly. Just chasing after and putting my hope in all of these things that I think are going to somehow bring me those things. And I'm going to tell you from experience, they don't. Never once have I been the best dad. The times when I'm a great dad, the times when I maybe pass the bar at being a good dad, or the times when I am a good husband to my wife, it doesn't last. The next day I make a mistake and screw up, and I'm kind of rude to her, or I'm a little bit impatient with my kids, and I'm like, oh yeah, if I put my hope in that as my identity, as who I am, if I put my focus in that, I will be dissatisfied through and through so many times over. But there's something really interesting that happens when we put our focus and our hope in Jesus as the author and finisher of our faith, is that everything else kind of falls in place. It's this really, really interesting thing that happens in my life where I end up being the dad I want to be. I end up being the husband I want to be. I end up being the teacher I want to be. I end up being the friend I want to be. when I put my focus on Jesus. Everything else falls into place. It's just really unique thing. And so my encouragement to you today, and kind of like the big thing about it, right, is understanding that Jesus loves you through and through. God sent him to die for you and raise again in 3 days to have a relationship with you, to get you through the good times and the difficult times, to be a constant in your life when you have that relationship that you can rely on. I'm not going to tell you that it's perfect, that all of a sudden everything in your life will simply just kind of fall into place and everything will be beautiful and it's this easy paved life. It's not. But every difficult moment that I have gone through in my life, where I have been a follower of Jesus, where I've had a relationship with Jesus, he has given me peace beyond my understanding, a way through the difficulty when I've relied on him. There's a great verse in Hebrews 12:2 that goes like this: keep your eyes on Jesus, who both began and finished this race we're in. Study how he did it. I really like to run and hike quite a bit. And a couple weeks ago, I was hiking the Grand Canyon with a friend of mine. And if you know anything about the Grand Canyon, it's pretty grand, and it's pretty large. And so we're hiking like downhill, like 7.5 miles, like right downhill. We get to the bottom, and then we're like, okay, like now we have to hike back up and out. And I had this moment where I was like, oh man. And I started to think about all of the things that were in place that were kind of like overwhelming to me. Like, oh, we're gonna have to climb right, like hike back out of that thing. It's gonna be really hot. It's getting hotter than it ever is. I'm really low on water. I'm kind of hungry. I'd rather be sitting and like eating lasagna than doing this. And I lost my focus. And I'm just telling you, like, there was a moment where I kind of hit this like low depression thing, and I was like, you know what? No, like let's. He gave me some encouragement. I gave him some encouragement. We got through. We got out of there. I survived, by the way. Spoiler alert. But I think there's a lot of parallels. There's a reason why in the Bible multiple times Paul talks about life being like a race, or life being like a big long hike or something like that. And when we focus on Jesus, when we put our focus there, as opposed to maybe the next hurdle that's in front of us, or the next challenge or difficulties that's in front of us, it's easy to lose focus and lose sight and start to feel that kind of hopeless feeling. God is doing amazing, amazing things in our life. And if we look for it, if we keep our focus on that, we have this really cool opportunity to be part of what he's already doing. But when we lose focus and start to think about the difficulties or the challenges that we're in, we can often miss out on what he has for us or what he wants for us. I'm going to read a quote for you, and then I'm going to give you 3 practical things. I like practicalities. I want something to like take home and work on. So let me read this quote for you, though, because Thomas Merton is one of my favorite authors. If you ever want to read a really smart guy, way smarter than me, that's why I'm reading a quote from him. No one reads quotes from me. He's the man. But listen to this. That's the meaning of hope, to trust in the ultimate goodness of creation. Hope doesn't mean an anticipation or an expectation of a deliverance from an intolerable or oppressive situation or condition. That's what most of us are doing most of the time, is wanting something other than what it is. And I think some of it's legit. Like, I hope to get out of a difficult situation. I hope to get out of a challenge. My desire is to get out of those things, right? Even if you think about the racial injustice throughout history, or the evil throughout history, or the violence throughout history, I think it's okay for people in those situations to hope to get out of them. But sometimes it doesn't work out like that. It's sad, but sometimes that stuff sticks around for a long time. The evil, the racism, the violence, the injustice, all of those things stick around, and we're in them, and it looks like there's no way out. But listen to the rest of this. As I said, true hope is trusting that what we have, where we are, and who we are is more than enough for us as creatures of God. I don't know what you're going through. I know I've said that 3 times. But my prayer and my hope for you is that you trust that what you have and where you are, even in a difficult situation, and who you are, is more than enough. That God is with you through the challenge and through the difficult times. Let me give you 3 practices in closing, and then at the end of that, I'll invite the band to come. One thing to do, I think, when you're feeling hopeless and when you're feeling like I've lost my focus, my eyes are off, I'm in this difficult situation, is to surround yourself with community. And at Eastown, we talk a lot about the things outside of just the Sunday morning experience, whether it's getting in a group or doing one of the meetup things or going on a hike with some friends. Literally, I had dinner with friends last night, and I'm like, this is such an encouragement, like just to spend time with good people. And it actually brings me out of like a funk. It reorients the way that I look at things. Every week I meet with a group of guys over Zoom, which I hate Zoom, but we meet with a group of guys and we just encourage each other in our walks, in our challenges, in our difficulties. And again, it helps me, gives me new perspective. There is something about community that's so unique. Don't do this life alone. God didn't design you that way. Whoever told you like you can do it on your own was a liar. We are made for community. We're made to be together. And there have been so many times where I have felt hopeless, like this is not going to end well, and people around me have given me the hope, because God wants to use the people around you to get you through it. And sometimes, I'm going to be honest with you, that might look like counseling or professional help. I'm standing here today like alive and somewhat well because of counseling in my life. Like, I would encourage you, if you are in a hopeless situation, if you can't see the end, I would encourage you to get help with no shame whatsoever. I am a better man for having somebody else in my life speak truth, see things I can't see. And so my encouragement would be to surround yourself with just good community. The second practice I would tell you would be to kind of practice gratitude. A lot of times gratitude, and a Stanford study did this, and so you have to believe me because I said a Stanford study. And every time someone says a Stanford study, everyone's like, yeah, that's gotta be true because it's Stanford. This Stanford study is true. They talked about what happens when we simply just wake up in the morning and write down 2 or 3 things that we are thankful for. How it literally shifts people's mindsets, their expectations, their entire moods by just writing down in the morning 2 or 3 things that they're thankful for. I started this a couple months ago, and I have been pretty horrendous at keeping it on a daily basis, but I have this little journal, and it's a gratitude journal. I simply just write down 1 or 2 things that I'm thankful for. I've missed a ton of days, so it's okay, right? No shame in that. But it has really helped me keep my perspective on what God has given me, even in the midst of maybe some challenging or difficult times. It reorients our perspective. And the third thing I would say, if you're in that situation, if you're feeling a little bit hopeless, is this is going to sound funny, but give it away. Your time and your talent and your resources. There is something that happens when we serve. Every year I take a group of about 20 high schoolers to like the middle of nowhere in New Mexico and Arizona to the Navajo reservation. And we do this massive service project. We're there for 10 days. And this year, this girl was going through some really hard times. Like it was a challenge, and she was emotional. She was going through just some real difficulties, home life, mental health stuff. Like it was a challenge. And she was like, I just don't know what to do. And I said, hey, like let's talk. Let's go through this. So we talked a little bit, and I said, hey, I want you to try something. I don't know if this is going to work, so if it doesn't, don't be angry at me later. But I want you to go, and I want you to work on this project that everybody else is working on. And I want you to see what happens. And I just want you to serve. I just want you to go in there and do that. And she did. She's like, okay, I'll give it a try. I'm not feeling it, but sure, I'll give it a try. And she did. And she came back later and she goes, something so weird happened while I was in there. I forgot about all of the things that I was going through. And I just started serving. And so I would encourage you to find a way to give away your time and your talent and your resources. It doesn't have to be here at Eastown, but to serve your community, to give away the extra that we have, to do something bigger than ourselves. A lot of times that can help us reorient ourselves and refocus on what really matters. As I close, I'm going to invite the band to come up. And I just want to give you some encouragement in here. Maybe you're at a point in your life in here where you're kind of on the fence, and that's okay, with the whole Jesus, what does it mean to follow Jesus type thing. And what I would encourage you to do is maybe let your doubt or your skepticism drive you to deeper research, to drive you into deeper study, to figure out where that skepticism is coming from, to figure out, hey, what's my next step? Like, no pressure, but just ask questions. Be open to maybe what Jesus has for you. And maybe you're in the room and you're like, hey, I've been following Jesus for a long time, but things kind of feel stale. Things kind of feel like I'm just kind of going through the motions. And my encouragement to you would be to practice those things that I talked about. Get in good community. If you don't know what that looks like, come and talk to someone at Eastown, a leader here, me, Clint and Michael when they get back next week, and get involved. I am a different person because of who I've surrounded myself with. It's not about me. It's about God using those people in my life. Practice gratitude. Get involved in your community with your time and your talent and your resources and see what changes in your life. My hope and my prayer for you today is that if you're a Jesus follower, you're rejuvenated in your walk with him and your following of him. My hope and my prayer is if you're not there yet, you realize that this is a place to explore, to realize that you can figure out what that might look like in your life. If you have questions after service, I'll be down here. I'd love to talk to you about it. I don't have all the answers. I can just tell you what I've gone through. Thank you.